Welcome to Milspouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to encouraging military spouses. I'm your host, Jen McDonald, and I was a military spouse for nearly 30 years until my husband's retirement. I'm now the mom of 4 young adults, including 1 active duty son. I also wrote the book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. Through my experiences, I came to believe that we're only stronger together. Whatever life is throwing your way as a military spouse, let's talk about it. So hello. Welcome to this episode of the Milspouse Matters podcast. This is your friend Jen, and I am so glad to be back with you after a couple months break. It is August as I'm recording this, and I hope you've had a great summer. And if you're looking to your kids going back to school or kind of getting back into that normal routine, I hope things are going great. Even though I don't have children in school any longer, I feel like fall is a great time to kind of reset and start over and clean out closets and do all those kinds of things that seem to be neglected during the summer months. And I hope it's cooling down wherever you are. A few announcements. I am super excited about my brand new site. We moved platforms, not that you care about those details, but it's much more functional. There's lots of new stuff on it. In fact, I am selling my book on my site now. So if you want to directly support me and also give back to other military nonprofits, I do donate a portion of sales to nonprofits that support military families if you buy them from my site. Also, there is a brand new 5-day deployment devotional that's available for download for purchase for just $3.99. It's beautiful. Tara Cochran from Olive Fox Design has redesigned all of these things for me. And so I hope that you'll go grab that. I think it's one of those things that could really be a support for you. It's similar to my old free downloadable, but this has reformatted extra stuff, has lots of journaling space. And so I think it could be something that's really beneficial for you if you're going through a deployment. And I'm hoping to bring more downloads and things like that soon. There's so much to catch up on. And so I'll just make this my version of this week's Jen's favorite things. The Christian Milspouse podcast is going to be launching here soon. I believe in a couple weeks after this episode drops. So the plan is those will be shorter 5 to 10 minute episodes to just encourage and strengthen you in your faith as a Christian military spouse. And I hope to drop those every Friday. That's the plan for right now. Since they're shorter, I'm hoping that I can keep up with that pace. If not, we'll just readjust. This podcast, the Milspouse Matters podcast, will be going out every other Wednesday. And I have lots of amazing guests and interviews coming up. I can't wait to share with you lots of topics that I've heard from you all that you want to hear about. And as always, if you have feedback or want a question answered, send me a note. Just email me at jen@jenmcdonald.net, or you can grab that from my site, jen-mcdonald.com, or find me on Instagram and Facebook as @Milspouse Matters. Those are all the ways you can reach me. That's exciting. That new podcast, I've had that on my heart to start it for a while. And so it's finally coming to fruition, and I'm hoping that will be something that you really enjoy. Also, coming up, I have a couple of speaking engagements. If you have ever been interested in starting a podcast or you're a podcaster and you want some support, the She Podcasts Live conference is happening October 11th through 14th in National Harbor in Washington, D.C., and I'm actually speaking at that. I will be talking about starting your podcast in midlife and beyond, why you should, why you're not too old, it's not too late, all the reasons why. And aside from my workshop session, there's lots of other good information, and it's a great way to connect with fellow podcasters. It's for female podcasters, so it's a great opportunity to connect with others in the female podcasting space. Only about 20-something% of podcast hosts are women. So that's really interesting. And we have some different and unique needs and challenges. So it's a great way to connect. So hope to see you there. Let me know if you're coming. I will link to that in the show notes. As always, anything I mention, I will link to in the show notes. Also, I am presenting a topic at the Pillar Deployment Retreat, November 4th through 6th, which is digital, all online, completely free. And I am talking about helping your teens navigate deployment. So we'll be talking about some tips of what your teenagers might be going through, ways that you can help them, support you can find for them and for you. And again, not just my topic, but there's lots of amazing speakers. I think there's 30 or so military spouse and military life experts talking about all kinds of topics, little kids, strengthening your marriage, reintegration, care packages, all sorts of great topics. So take a look at that. You don't have to watch it live. It's great if you do because the speakers will be in there answering questions. And all you need to do is just go grab your free ticket and you can join the Facebook group and stay updated on what's coming for that. So, on this episode, I am doing some Q&A from you listeners. I have saved these. I took a bunch of questions at the end of summer, thinking I would get to that before the summer break, just didn't happen. So, I'm answering those as well as some questions from my Christian Military Spouses Facebook group. And if you would like to join that, that's always open. You just need to search for it. Again, it'll be linked in the show notes. And answer a few questions so that we are sure that you're a military spouse, veteran spouse, that you're eligible to be in the group, and just kind of screen that to try to keep everybody safe. And we'll get you right in. So before we get into those questions, I wanted to address something I've seen popping up lately. And I saw a post about this, and basically it was in a group I'm in, and it was somebody saying, why do you call yourselves mil spouses or military spouses? You shouldn't identify yourself as a military spouse. No one else says that about their spouse's job. People don't say, I'm a dentist spouse or I'm a chef's spouse or whatever. This is my take on that. I've seen some other people respond really great to that, but I thought, you know what? This is one of those things that seems to come around every few years. It's old and tired and it's just kind of silly, and I think it's maybe some people actually really are well-intentioned. They're like, no, I am more than a mil spouse or I'm more than this. And yes, of course you are. You're not just a military spouse. You know that. You know that's not the only thing you are. But it's not the same as saying I'm a dentist's wife or whatever. Because being in a military family affects all aspects of your life. And you'll find this out even if you fight against it, it will. If your spouse stays in, it's going to affect you, whether it's solo parenting or picking up and moving across the world at a moment's notice, to the effect it has on our kiddos. And there's just a shared experience among military spouses that can't be replicated. And I will tell you, you can call yourself a military spouse, you can call yourself a mil spouse without apology. As Air Force widow Anita Doan said, and she's one of the ladies that I interviewed for my upcoming book, her husband was in the military during the Vietnam era. And she says, nobody else understands what you did without, what you went through, what you had to do by yourself. So I think that is enough said. You do you. And if other people have an issue with it, just carry on and ignore that. Okay, to our questions. Here are a couple from Instagram. This first one is from Reba. I will give first names or their handle, whatever I have available for who the question came from. So Reba says, in your opinion, what has been the easiest and hardest part of being a mil spouse? I have had a share of mine and wonder about others. The easiest part has probably been just loving my quote person, my husband. I think that's one thing that gets you through. And I've had guests talk about this on the podcast before. When you stop and remember why you fell in love, why you chose this life, that part can be the easiest most of the time. I think the hardest part would be starting over and over, like maybe the first time or two. It's exciting, it's new. I think there's a weariness that can come in as you have done this over and over, especially towards the end of your spouse's career. That did begin to wear on me because I remember when I was a brand new military spouse, and I believe I wrote about this in my book or an article. I met an older spouse who just said, I don't make friends. It's not worth it. I'm tired of starting over. And, I was 20 something. I thought, oh my goodness, so jaded. I could never be like that. Well, as my husband got to the end of his career, I never could do that. But I remember thinking, I get why she feels that way because it is a lot. So that part of it was hard. I think also the continued time apart, especially that last decade of my husband's service, we were apart more than together. Again, it just brings a weariness with it where you're like, this is not normal, right? You cope with it, you get used to it, but it's also not something that you really want to get used to. And also that part of not having any control over what was happening, over what the future meant, and having to make peace with that repeatedly. And these are not anything that I learned the lesson once and it was over with. It's stuff that I had to keep relearning. So that's a good question. So Dahlia says, What advice would you give about sharing hard stuff while hubby is deployed? We're on our first, and I'm trying to find the balance between keeping communication lines open and not burdening him with the hard stuff, like bad days, difficult family matters, or just important but not fun stuff to talk about when we only have limited communication. I know he has enough to worry about without worrying about stuff at home, but I don't want to undershare either and have to relearn good communication when he gets home. So this is what I will say to that. This is such a balancing act. One way I looked at it was, especially with my husband's types of deployments, we had very limited communication. So if it was something that really wouldn't matter in a couple of days, I usually would not bring it up. If it was something I needed advice or input on, like parenting issues or something with the extended family or something else, I might put that in an email rather than wasting, like, precious phone time, or if you have video chat. I didn't usually bring that sort of stuff up on our limited talks because we just didn't have a lot of time to talk on the phone. So whatever, if you have more time to talk and it's something you've let it sit for a couple of days, you think, "You know what? Let me see what they think about this." We want to share everything with them, but it really isn't possible during this time, and I think there's an aspect of letting go of that, of realizing as much as I want them involved in every detail, it's not realistic, and it's just not practical for you. And so kind of picking and choosing what are the things that really, really matter to bring up with them. You are going to have to probably relearn some communicating when they do get home. It doesn't matter how well you try to handle it. I think I've said this before during my husband's last deployment. It was a year long, and we got a little smug. And he'd been in 20 something years at that point. We thought, we've got this. We know how to do this. And we really thought we would kind of skate through that reintegration period when he got home, and we did not. I mean, we still had to work through some issues and talk about things and work it out. And so just if you just know that, that helps take some of that pressure off you. It doesn't matter how much you prepare. When you've been apart and had separate experiences, you are going to have to reintegrate and get used to each other. It's just the way it is. Even Poodle 24, this is from Instagram, says, "Hubby is coming home from deployment and I feel nervous. Is this normal?" Absolutely, yes. So give both of you some time and grace. And like I just mentioned, you've both changed, you've been through separate experiences, and you need to get to know each other in a new way. I have a ton of information and episodes about deployment and reintegration, not just my experience, but other spouses. And especially episode 34 is called Preparing for Deployment and Reintegration. If you go to my site and just search the term deployment, it'll pull up all of my blog posts, all the past episodes. But I'll just run down these real quick. Episode 32, Deployment Resources for Your Military Family. Episode 73, episode 58, episode 54, episode 53, episode 52. And then, oh, sorry, I forgot which episode this is. There's one about with helping your children, and then episode 18. So, yes, absolutely normal to feel nervous, and hopefully you can find something useful in everything I just mentioned. I hope that helps you. So before we go on to the next question, here is a word from one of our sponsors. Thanks to Code Wizards HQ for sponsoring this episode. Give your child programming knowledge, skills, and the confidence to thrive in a digital world through fun and effective live online coding classes. For kids ages 8 to 18, you'll find beginning basics to their innovative internship program. Online classes are led by exceptional instructors. In fact, only the top 2% of applicants are hired, and they use a student first approach to teach real world programming languages. Each coding class is tailored to engage elementary, middle, and high school students with a curriculum that is comprehensive, developmental, challenging, and fun. The Code Wizards HQ student success rate is 15 times better than self paced video courses and tutorials. And with a 4 session money back guarantee, your students can try this program risk free. Code Wizards HQ appreciates the unique educational challenges that military families face, and they offer a 30% discount on all courses to active duty, veterans, retirees, reservists, National Guard, and dependents. Code Wizards HQ is your child's path to coding success wherever you call home. Learn more at codewizardshq.com and visit the link in the show notes for a 30% military discount. So, our next question comes from Amy, and she said, "How to keep sane when PCSing just after giving birth?" and this was asked in May. I had sent that question to the Christian Military Spouses Facebook group as well as asked it on my Instagram and got so much great input that I ended up making a whole episode about this, and I hope you saw it. It was episode 83. So if that's something you're going through, go back and listen because there's lots of great advice there. My experience, I did move just a few months after having my last daughter. And as a matter of fact, we had her in August. I think we put our house on the market the next month. She was the youngest of four. And then we were on the road driving by January from Texas to Florida. So, just in a nutshell, my experience is accept help. My mother in law offered to come with us and drive with us because we were taking two vehicles, pulling a U-Haul, four little kids. And she offered to come and drive along with us. And I accepted. I needed that help. I needed another set of hands with all of that. If you are moving just after giving birth, just let go of certain things. Take naps when you can. If there's a way that the active duty person can go ahead and maybe come back and you can go later, or you come along later, there's lots of ways to work this. There's no one right way to do it. I had somebody else ask me about moving with little kids that they felt like they were doing it, quote, wrong because their spouse was finishing boot camp and then they were staying with their family and going to come later. And I just told her, I said, there's no one right way. Do what works for your family. And this too will pass. I feel like that's one of those sayings you just kind of get used to in military life. It will be over at some point, right? So it's not fun. And I really feel for you. So hopefully you are past that point now and you got through it too. I'd love to hear from you. Speaking of moms, this episode is also sponsored by the Moms Grab Coffee podcast, a podcast for Christian moms who want to know more about who God is and how you can build unshakable joy and trust in Him through every season of life. Is God really who He says He is? Hannah, your host, grabs coffee with moms who share their own stories and talk about how God pulled them through and revealed Himself to be good, real, and loving. Through raw topics, honest conversations, and powerful wisdom, delivered by moms to moms, you'll unseat anxiety and stress and instead embrace hope, peace, and joy. You will also hear powerful testimonies from moms who've walked through all kinds of dark seasons like miscarriages, broken relationships, medical conditions, mental health struggles, and more, and hopefully walk away with practical ways to keep pressing into your own faith when life gets hard. Learn more about Moms Grab Coffee, trusting God in every season at momsgrabcoffee.com and find it wherever you listen to podcasts. So the next question is from Lars Nem, and they say, did you ever feel torn between personal happiness priorities and a spouse's job or career change? And yes, absolutely. And just when you get used to it, it can all change over again. You may think, okay, I've settled in, I've got this job, or I've got this thing that I'm doing, and then career paths change, like they're on a track for promotion or they're going to move and you're going to go along with that, right? And so I would just say how to cope with that. Remember, it's for a season. You're on the same team. It should be a partnership. And so it's hard when you're in the middle of it to feel like you're not just sacrificing everything and giving up. And I would really caution against that mindset because that can go into such a negative space. It really is a short time in the span of your whole life. In fact, this seems crazy. I was the one holding down the home front for years and years. My husband was gone all the time. And now I travel all the time just with things that have happened now that he's out of the military. Our kids are older. I go see my grandbaby. I go to conferences. I travel with my daughter for her Irish dance. And like I mentioned, I'm doing some more speaking. And so it's kind of funny that I'm the one leaving and he's the one here. And so just, whatever it is right at this moment is not the way it's always going to be. Again, remember you're in a partnership. I think there's a saying that says, it's a 50-50. No, that's not true. Sometimes you're the one giving more and then the tables turn and they are. And that's just married life. And so I would say hang in there. Try to do what you can if you're able to take classes or go to school or put your own career forward somehow. There's so many options now. It doesn't mean that you have to put all your hopes and dreams on the back burner. It just may look different than that linear path that you had hoped for. So I don't know if that speaks to where you are at all, but I hope that it helps somehow. I would also say episode 82, I really talked about this a lot, and it's comparisons and admitting you need help. And a lot of it came from my book, You Are Not Alone: Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. So we talked about the themes of comparisons, discontentment with military life, and admitting when we need help. Sometimes we as military spouses need the reminder that we don't get a medal for being the toughest and doing everything on our own. And also comparing our situation to our civilian friends and families and wishing we had it differently is not the most productive thing. So, we talked about ways to cultivate contentment and the importance of not struggling alone and finding that community. So, if you've heard past episodes, if you are a longtime military spouse, I had Jen Pasquale on from Pride and Grit, and she talked a lot about finding others in the same boat and other people that can relate and getting that input from other spouses that's helpful and not negative. So the next question is from the same person, and they said, any advice on how to handle feelings of resentment starting to build? So I would just go back to what I was just talking about. I think a lot of that applies. And letting go of what I couldn't control was definitely a key. It's hard, easy to say, hard to do. One other little piece of advice I would say is don't play the who has it the worst game with your spouse. Nobody wins. And I think there's a temptation to kind of quantify everything, if that makes sense. I remember, especially when I had little kids, I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I only got 3.5 hours of sleep. I was up this many times, or okay, the baby threw up this many times, and trying to it wasn't like I was trying to make it that I had it worse, but it's almost like I had to let go over my mind of all the little hard things that had happened. And did that ever help me feel better or move on or get through my day or have a positive mindset? Absolutely not. So I would just say if that's kind of something you're falling into, maybe let that go of like you've been gone this many days this month, or I've had to do this, or I've picked the kids up from school this many times. Like those are things that are just if you're wanting your relationship with your spouse to move forward, those are not things that are fruitful or productive to dwell on. Now, that said, if you need to communicate with your spouse that you're really struggling, I'm not saying to stuff it all down and not communicate that you could use help. And maybe it's not going to come from them. Maybe it's going to come from a sitter or something else that your kids can be involved in where you get a break. And I'm kind of just reading this as maybe like if you have a lot of little kids, maybe that's where you're at, or whatever the scenario is. There's no way for me to know. But if there's a way that you need a break, you need something different, you need to be able to communicate that so that you aren't feeling resentful and taken advantage of. I hope that helps. Alexandria said, do you have any insight on living in Bahrain? Not much info out there. And I don't have any input on specifically Bahrain. I would say my last episode, episode 86 with Julie Tully, she lived in some very different places because they worked with the embassy diplomat. He was a diplomat, and so she was not in the typical military spouse channels, but usually would connect with somebody that was already there. So hopefully your spouse can connect you with someone, another military spouse that's already there who can kind of give you the most updated information and the unique things that you're going to be looking for that somebody else that's never been stationed there just wouldn't know. So good luck to you. Becca says, tips to keep your relationship strong during an overseas PCS. First, I would say recognize that it is going to be a little bit of a stressful time, that overseas move. So try your best to communicate, stay connected. I think one of the best things to do, especially your first overseas PCS, it was an adventure for both of us. And it was just trying to look at it as an adventure and a lot of fun. And it's like, let's go exploring together. Let's go do these really fun things and all these unique experiences. And maybe not the fun things like where you just have that language barrier or just the little idiosyncrasies that can come along with living overseas and you can laugh at. And they really do become your greatest memories. And my husband would always say, this is going to be a great memory. This is going to be something so funny to look back on one day and always be like, I don't think this is fun, like a typhoon or whatever. But we talk about those things now because those are building that shared experience and your history together. But most of all, have fun. So Eileen asks, is it normal to feel jealous of the relationship he has with the Army? I feel second place. So you do have to make peace with military life at some point. I believe I have an episode called Making Peace with Military Life. And I think it's just coming to terms with the fact that they love you, but they don't have a choice once they've signed that dotted line. They are at the beck and call of the military, and it does change things. And it doesn't mean they love you less or that you're not a priority. On certain moments, you are less of a priority to the needs of the military, but that doesn't mean you're less of a priority in how they feel about you, in their love for you. So I think it's just recognizing that both of those things can be true at once. They're at the behest of the military and they do still love you very much. So it's just accepting that, I think. Ava said, "Is it normal to be sad about going from dating for 2 years to joining military life and missing the old life?" And I would say, yes, this is a transition. Just lean into it and grieve what you've lost, but don't stay stuck there. Move forward and just embrace this new life. Again, I don't want to keep like plugging my book, but I have written about a lot of these things and I had a very hard adjustment to military life in the beginning days. And so maybe you can relate to some of that. And I do wish that I could go back and tell myself some things like, you know what, you wallowed too long, or you, you should have tried a little harder. And you just have to go through it. I would just say, yes, grieve it, but then start looking at the new things you get to do and try to look for the positive aspects of this life. Jenny said, "How do I prepare for an overseas PCS move? I'm overwhelmed." So one step at a time, one day at a time, one task at a time. There is a myriad of tasks that you're going to have to do. The nice thing is the military has done this before. So they will have all the checklists for the military member. They will have that all in place, all the things you've got to do, your medical clearance and all the, shipping your car, your household goods, all of that. They have systems, lists, just follow along with that. I also have a lot of resources for you on my website. There I have a whole PCS resource page that talks about moving your pets, moving with your kids, preparing your household goods. And I point to lots of other outside resources that are experts in this field. And I have a lot of past podcast episodes on PCS. If you just, again, do a search, PCS Move, and they are linked from that PCS resource page, which I will put in the show notes. So hang in there. I love to hear from you. I hope that your PCS Move goes great. Lists, those are always my best friend. I had a list for everything. So if that's how your brain works, get your list, get it out of your brain, get it onto a list, and you will be just fine. That is it for this episode. I am looking forward to connecting with you over this coming season. Again, find me on social media. And remember, you are brave, you are strong, and you have got this. Bye-bye. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Milspouse Matters podcast. Connect with me at jen-mcdonald.com or on social media as @MilspouseMatters. You can find even more military life support with my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, and my other podcast, The Christian Milspouse. Love the show? Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening, and then share it with someone else who could use it too. Until next time, have a great week.